Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The night was quiet over the Scottish Highlands, a soft veil of mist drifting across the lake that mirrored the moon. Hogwarts Castle loomed beyond it, every tower and turret gleaming faintly under the silver light. It was a picture of peace. But Minerva McGonagall, standing in her office at the top of the castle, did not feel peaceful at all. Her sharp eyes, behind square spectacles, followed the steady glow of the torches along the courtyard. The year had been long. Rebuilding after the war was no small thing. Walls could be mended and windows replaced, but hearts were slower to heal. Many of the students still woke with nightmares. Many of the professors did too. McGonagall's gaze lingered on a framed photograph that sat upon her desk, the first class she had ever taught, long before the Dark Lord's shadow had darkened the world. They were smiling children, every one of them, most still alive, some not. She sighed softly and turned to the stack of parchment beside her. That was when the whisper came. It was faint. So faint that she thought at first it might have been the wind sneaking through a crack in the window. But then it came again, a soft murmur like a voice echoing from a great distance, her quill stilled in midair. Headmistress McGonagall straightened. "Who's there?" No reply, only the crackle of the fire. She moved quietly to the door, wand drawn, every sense alert. In the years since the war, strange remnants of dark magic had appeared now and then. A cursed mirror unearthed from the dungeons. A rogue spell trapped in a classroom wall. This, she thought, could be another such thing. The corridor outside was empty, moonlight streaming through tall windows. Portraits of long-dead witches and wizards snored gently in their frames. McGonagall listened again, holding her breath. The castle was never silent, not truly. It creaked and sighed like a living thing. But this sound, this whisper, was different. Then came a sudden thud from below. She descended the spiral staircase swiftly, her tartan dressing gown flaring behind her, and found herself outside the Transfiguration corridor. The sound had come from one of the classrooms. Professor Longbottom's, she realized with surprise. Pushing open the door, she froze. A boy, a first year, lay crumpled on the floor, pale as parchment. His body was still, his eyes open but glassy, as if staring at something far away. Hovering above him was a faint shape, shimmering, silvery, almost a mirror image of the boy himself. For one heartbeat, McGonagall's blood turned to ice. Then the shape flickered and vanished. She dropped to her knees beside the boy. Merlin's Birch, "Mr. Alden, can you hear me?" No answer. His breathing was shallow, his pulse faint. Within minutes, Madame Pomfrey had been summoned. The nurse's eyes were grave as she examined the child. "He's alive," she said at last. "But it's as if part of him isn't here." McGonagall frowned. "What do you mean?" Pomfrey hesitated. "It's as though something has drawn out a thread of his spirit. He's not cursed exactly, but something's taken hold." McGonagall rose to her feet. "And the shimmer I saw above him?" "That," Pomfrey said quietly, "sounds like his soul." The word sent a chill through the room. Even the portraits along the wall seemed to fall silent. "Keep him here," McGonagall said firmly. "No one is to go near him unless you're with him." She left the hospital wing and walked briskly through the corridors, her mind racing, a soul displaced. That was ancient magic, dangerous magic, not something a child could have stumbled into by accident. By dawn, she'd gathered her staff. Neville Longbottom looking worried but determined, Professor Flitwick, small and sharp-eyed as ever, and even Hagrid, who had insisted on coming. "The boy's soul?" Hagrid repeated, horrified. "You mean like what you know who did with his Horcruxes?" "No," McGonagall said firmly. "This isn't dark magic. It feels older. The castle itself may be involved." Flitwick frowned. "The castle? Do you mean the enchantments the founders placed when it was built?" "Perhaps," McGonagall said. "But those protections were sealed centuries ago. None of us should be able to reach them or awaken them." Neville, pale but thoughtful, said, "What if they're not sealed anymore?" McGonagall met his gaze. "Then we have a great deal of work ahead of us." That night, long after the others had gone, she returned to her office. She stood by the fire, her cat eyes narrowed in thought. If this was the work of the castle's deepest enchantments, she would need to understand their source. She reached for a book bound in fading leather. The Founder's Grimoire, a record of ancient spells woven into Hogwarts foundations. As she turned its brittle pages, one entry caught her eye, a spell marked with a symbol of 2 crossed keys, Claves Animarum, the keys of souls. McGonagall's heart quickened. The text beneath was written in an archaic script, but she could make out enough to grasp its meaning. The spell was meant to guard the castle's spiritual realm, keeping the living and the dead in balance. But there was a warning. When the keys are turned by mortal hand, the script read, "The balance shall break, and the living shall wander between their shadows." McGonagall looked up, the firelight flickering in her eyes. Someone or something had turned those keys, and if she did not find out who, more souls would soon be lost. Morning broke pale and cold over the towers of Hogwarts, and though the sun struggled through the mist, the castle seemed cloaked in unease. Word of the boy's strange collapse had spread through the school before breakfast. Students whispered in corners. Even the portraits looked more watchful than usual. Professor McGonagall moved swiftly down the great hall, her robes sweeping across the flagstones. Every sound, the clatter of spoons, the murmur of voices, seemed distant, muffled by tension. She paused at the high table beside Neville Longbottom, who was staring absently into a porridge. "Any change?" she asked quietly. Neville shook his head. "None. Madame Pomfrey says he's stable, but she still can't wake him. It's like he's..." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Like he's here but not here." McGonagall nodded grimly. "And the other students?" "They're frightened," Neville admitted. A few claimed they saw their own reflections moving differently in the glass, as if something inside the mirrors was alive. McGonagall's eyes narrowed. Mirrors. She glanced toward the long line of enchanted windows, each one glittering with soft morning light. Hogwarts had always been alive with its own kind of magic, but this was something more. A stirring of the castle's very soul. Before she could speak again, a sudden crack split the air. A lantern above the Slytherin table burst into flame, showering sparks. Students shrieked. The enchanted ceiling darkened like a gathering storm. McGonagall flicked her wand sharply, extinguishing the fire with a hiss. The silence that followed was heavy. Then she said, calm but commanding. All students are to remain in their common rooms after classes today. Professors will accompany them. No one is to wander alone. Do I make myself clear? 100 heads nodded, pale faces watching her as if she alone stood between them and something unseen. That evening, long after curfew, McGonagall met Neville in the shadowed corridor outside the library. The torches burned low, casting thin ribbons of light over the stone floor. "I found something," he whispered, holding out a folded scrap of parchment. "It was inside one of the herbology tomes, but it doesn't belong there. Look." She unfolded it carefully. The parchment was old, the ink faded to brown. In the center was drawn a pair of crossed keys, the same symbol she'd seen in the Founder's Grimoire. Beneath it were 6 Latin words: Custodes animarum dormiunt sub lapide tertio. McGonagall translated under her breath. "The guardians of souls sleep beneath the 3rd stone." Neville frowned. "Guardians? What does that mean?" "I suspect we'll find out," she said, tucking the parchment into her cloak. "Come. We're going to the dungeons." They descended through the torchlit corridors, past the echoing suits of armor that seemed to watch them as they passed. The dungeons smelled faintly of damp earth and age. At the base of the old staircase near the potions classroom lay a mosaic of stone tiles, once part of Salazar Slytherin's original design. McGonagall knelt, running her fingers along the cold surface. 1, 2, 3, she counted softly. Then she pressed her wand tip against the 3rd stone, Aperio. With a rumbling sigh, the stone slid aside, revealing a narrow stairway spiraling into darkness. Neville swallowed hard. "I'll go first." "You'll do no such thing," McGonagall said briskly. "Stay close, and do not speak unless necessary." They descended slowly, the air growing colder with each step. The stairway opened at last into a cavernous chamber lit by ghostly blue fire that burned in sconces along the walls. The floor was inscribed with runes that pulsed faintly, as if in rhythm with a heartbeat. In the center stood 3 statues, carved from black marble, shaped like tall hooded figures holding great keys. Their faces were hidden, but their presence was unmistakable. Guardians. McGonagall approached cautiously. "These are no ordinary enchantments," she murmured. "This is founder magic, bound to the castle itself." Neville pointed to the nearest statue. "Look, the key. It's missing from his hand." She followed his gaze. Indeed, one of the marble hands was empty, the fingers curved as though once clutching something that was no longer there. "Someone's taken it," she whispered. "That's why the balance is failing. The keys of souls must remain in place to separate spirit from shadow. Without them, the boundaries blur." A faint rustling filled the air. McGonagall turned sharply and saw shapes moving in the blue light, silhouettes faint and wavering like people made of mist. They floated between the statues, faces indistinct, whispering in soft, hollow voices. Neville backed away, trembling. "What are they?" McGonagall's voice was steady, though her heart raced. "Echoes. Fragments of the students' souls, drawn here by the broken enchantment." The whispers grew louder, overlapping. Some wept, others called out words that could barely be understood. Among them, McGonagall thought she heard a small voice, frightened, pleading. "Headmistress, help." She lifted her wand. "Lumos Maxima." Brilliant white light filled the chamber. The spirits shrieked and dissolved, leaving only the faint shimmer of air disturbed. When the light faded, McGonagall turned to Neville. "We must find the missing key. Without it, more souls will be drawn here, until the castle itself becomes a prison for the living." Neville swallowed hard. Who could have taken it? "That," she said grimly, "is the question." Back in her office, she summoned the one person who might know the castle's darker secrets better than anyone alive. When the door opened, Draco Malfoy stepped inside, pale as the moonlight that fell across the floor. "Professor," he said carefully, "I heard you wanted to see me." McGonagall studied him in silence for a long moment. He looked older, worn by the years since the war, though the sharpness in his gray eyes remained. "I did," she said at last. "You were a Slytherin, Mr. Malfoy. Your family's ties to the castle's oldest magic are not unknown to me." His jaw tightened. "You think this has something to do with my family?" "I think," McGonagall said evenly, "that your ancestors may have known the locations of the Founder's enchantments. One of those enchantments has been disturbed. A key is missing." Draco hesitated, glancing toward the fire. "If it's what I think it is," he said slowly, "then you won't find it in the castle." Her brow furrowed. "Explain." "The key of souls," he said, voice low, "was hidden by Salazar Slytherin himself to protect it from misuse. But my grandfather once told me the hiding place wasn't just beneath the castle. It was within it." McGonagall frowned. "Within?" Draco nodded. "Part of the castle's living magic. A secret chamber that only opens when the castle itself chooses. If someone has awakened it, it means the magic has turned restless." Neville looked from one to the other. "Then how do we reach it?" Draco met McGonagall's gaze. "You don't find the chamber," he said quietly. "It finds you." A long silence followed. The fire crackled softly. Finally, McGonagall said, "Then we shall give it reason to." Outside, thunder rumbled above the forbidden forest. The castle groaned, as if in reply. And somewhere deep below, unseen, the empty hand of the guardian statue tightened around nothing at all. The following night brought rain, cold, relentless, and whispering against the castle walls like restless fingers. Lightning flashed over the turrets, casting sharp white light through McGonagall's window. She stood by the glass, watching the storm twist over the lake, her reflection wavering in the pain. The castle, she thought, felt alive in a way it had not in years, though not in any comforting sense. Its magic was stirring, ancient and uneasy. A knock came at the door. When she turned, Neville and Draco entered, cloaked against the damp, their faces drawn and pale. "The students are unsettled," Neville said. "They say they hear voices in the corridors after midnight. Some of them claim to see copies of themselves walking the halls." McGonagall's eyes darkened. "The shadows have begun to wake." Draco stepped closer to the fire. "If the key of souls has been removed, the barrier between life and reflection will collapse. The castle will mirror its dwellers, not just their forms, but their fears, their guilt." He hesitated, his voice low. "I've seen it before." Neville looked at him sharply. "You've seen it?" Draco nodded slowly. "In the ruins beneath my family's old manor. My grandfather once attempted to harness the enchantment's power. The spell drew forth an echo of him, a hollow man, identical in shape, but with eyes like glass. He vanished soon after." McGonagall listened, her mind moving swiftly. Then we face an echoing, a breach between soul and shadow. She turned toward the door. Gather your courage, gentlemen. We are going below once more. They crossed the sleeping castle under cover of thunder. The corridors were empty, yet the air felt heavy, with unseen movement like breath in the dark. Candles flickered, though no wind touched them. From distant halls came faint laughter, children's voices echoing where no child should be. At the staircase to the dungeons, McGonagall raised her wand. Lumos. The spell cast a bright white glow, pushing back the gloom. They descended together, step by step, until they reached the chamber of the guardians once more. The blue fire still burned, but now its light was dimmer, and the runes upon the floor pulsed irregularly, like a faltering heart. One of the statues had cracked from crown to base. The breach widens, McGonagall murmured. Neville moved closer to the empty-handed guardian. Professor, look. From the crack in its arm spilled a faint stream of light, drifting upward like smoke. It shimmered, then split apart, forming the shape of a child, ghostly and frightened. It was the boy from before, young Alden. His eyes were wide and unseeing. Head mistress. The voice was hollow, echoing from a place far beyond the chamber. They're calling. The keys are calling. McGonagall stepped forward, steadying her voice. Alden, can you hear me? But the boy's form wavered and dissolved into mist. The blue fires flickered, and a low sound, like a sigh through stone, filled the room. Draco turned in a slow circle. Do you hear that? It came again, soft but distinct, the sound of footsteps echoing from the shadows. Another figure appeared at the edge of the light. For an instant, McGonagall thought it was Neville, but Neville was standing beside her. The newcomer was his mirror, identical but hollow-eyed, his expression vacant, his movements slow and deliberate. Neville stepped back, color draining from his face. That's your echo? McGonagall said grimly. The soul's reflection, do not approach it. The double tilted its head, imitating Neville's every move a heartbeat later. Then, without warning, it spoke in his voice, but the tone was wrong, stretched thin like glass about to shatter. You failed to save them all, Neville Longbottom. Neville froze. What? You fought bravely, the echo continued, but you still watched them fall. You stood in the rubble of the Great Hall and promised yourself it was enough. But was it? Stop, Neville whispered. Draco raised his wand. Get back. No, McGonagall said sharply. It feeds on resistance. Do not give it your fear. But Neville's double took another step forward, eyes gleaming with pale light. The chamber trembled. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure burst apart into mist, leaving only silence. McGonagall's breath came fast, though her expression remained controlled. The enchantment is growing stronger. The echoes are forming of their own accord. Draco lowered his wand. If it can conjure shadows of us, it may use them against us. We'll see more before the end. McGonagall nodded grimly. Then we must move quickly. She lifted her wand toward the cracked statue. Reveal what was taken. The runes upon the floor flared to life, and for a moment, the chamber filled with blinding light. When it faded, a trail of faint silver footprints led away from the Guardian's pedestal, up a narrow side passage carved from rough stone. This way, she said. They followed the trail through the twisting corridor until it opened into a smaller chamber. The walls here were smooth and gleaming, as if shaped by magic rather than hand. In the center stood a plinth of black stone. Upon it rested a single object, an ornate key forged of silver and crystal, glowing faintly. The missing key, Neville breathed. McGonagall stepped closer, but Draco caught her arm. Wait! The air around the key shimmered like heat rising from fire. The stone beneath it was etched with Slytherin's mark, the serpent and the crescent moon. It's a trap, Draco said softly. It's not meant to be touched by the living. The magic will defend itself. As if in answer, the glow around the key deepened. A voice filled the chamber. Not one of theirs, but deep and echoing, ancient as the stones. Who seeks to turn the keys of souls? McGonagall straightened. I do. Minerva McGonagall, headmistress of Hogwarts, protector of this school. The voice replied, the keys were not forged for mortal hands. They bind what must not walk. Turn them and the shadow shall rise. The balance is already broken, she said. A soul has been stolen. I seek only to restore what was lost. A pause. Then a sound like laughter, low and cold. Then you must pay the keeper's price. The floor trembled. The key rose from the plinth, spinning in midair, light spilling from it in bright arcs. Shadows slithered across the walls, forming shapes, hands, faces, empty eyes. Draco shouted, the chamber's rejecting us. Neville lifted his wand. Protego! The shield charm flared to life just as a wave of shadow struck, shattering against it like a storm on glass. McGonagall raised her wand, shouting above the roar, Finite Obscurum. The shadows recoiled. The key dropped suddenly, landing in her outstretched hand. Silence fell. The air was heavy, thick with fading magic. Neville looked around, trembling. Is it over? McGonagall studied the key, its glow now steady, pulsing faintly with light. No, she said quietly. This was only one of them. Draco frowned. One? She turned toward the passage, her face grave. There are 3 keys of souls. One for each of the founders who bound this enchantment. Slytherin's key was taken, but the others are awakening. If the balance fails, the castle itself will become a vessel for every lost spirit ever bound to its walls. Thunder rolled above, shaking the ceiling dust loose. McGonagall slipped the key into a pocket of her cloak, her expression hardening. Come, we must reach the next chamber before the echoes do. And as they ascended far below them in the dark, something stirred. A whisper like wind through a graveyard, rising and falling in 1,000 ghostly voices. The keys have turned. The gate begins to open. Rain continued through the next day, turning the lawns into silver pools and sending mist crawling up the castle walls. By afternoon, the storm had deepened. Thunder echoed across the mountains, and the air inside Hogwarts was thick with tension. The students had been confined to their common rooms, yet rumors flowed faster than ever. Some claimed the castle whispered to them at night. Others said they had seen glowing shapes drifting through the stairwells. McGonagall barely paused to eat. The silver key, Slytherin's key, rested on her desk, gleaming faintly even in shadow. Its power hummed against her fingertips, alive with a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. Neville and Draco entered without knocking. Neville's face was pale, his cloak damp from the rain. Draco looked exhausted, though his usual reserve kept his expression unreadable. The wards around the astronomy tower flickered again, Neville reported. I felt a cold wind there. Not natural. And the mirrors on the 5th floor are fogging over. We can't keep the students calm much longer. McGonagall nodded, her mind already racing. It's beginning. The removal of Slytherin's key has awakened the others. If the enchantments of the Founders unravel, the veil between soul and body may vanish entirely. Draco glanced at the glowing key. You said there are 3. If one belonged to Slytherin, the others must be Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws. Indeed, McGonagall said. The Founders cast their magic together, and so the keys were spread across their domains. Slytherin hid his in the depths. Ravenclaw, I suspect, concealed hers in the heights. Some were touched by air and thought. And Hufflepuff's, she paused, likely lies beneath the roots of the earth. Neville frowned. The greenhouses? McGonagall's lips thinned, or deeper still. They descended once more into the dim corridors, the thunder outside rumbling like distant drums. When they passed through the entrance hall, they found a group of portraits whispering urgently to one another. The fat friar called out as they approached, "Headmistress, the spirits are uneasy. Ghosts wandering beyond their chambers. Even Peeves has gone silent." McGonagall stopped short. Silent? The friar nodded nervously. Not a cackle since dawn. The castle holds its breath, I think. Something old is moving. They pressed on. The castle itself seemed to shift as they walked. Staircases muttering, walls creaking like voices half awake. The trio reached the first floor corridor where the rain beat against the tall windows. At the far end stood a wide mirror. The mirror of Erised's smaller twin, once used for reflection charms. Now its surface rippled like dark water. Draco stopped. "It's reacting." McGonagall raised her wand. "Stand back." The mirror pulsed once and a face appeared. Her own, but not quite. Its eyes were colder, older, filled with something ancient and weary. The reflection spoke in her voice, but the tone was distant, hollow. "You think you protect them," it said, "but you are only binding yourself to their fate. Hogwarts remembers all who lead it, and all it takes from them." McGonagall felt a chill down her spine, but did not flinch. "Be gone. You have no power here." The reflection's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Not yet." Then it vanished, leaving only her true reflection staring back. Neville whispered, "It's happening everywhere now, isn't it?" "Yes," she said. "The echoes grow bolder. We must reach Ravenclaw's key before the magic collapses." They climbed the spiraling staircases toward the western towers. The corridors narrowed, lined with cold stone and fading banners. By the time they reached the top floor, the air had grown thin and sharp with enchantment. The entrance to the Ravenclaw Tower shimmered with its familiar bronze door, the one that posed riddles to those who sought entry. But tonight, the eagle knocker was already speaking, its voice layered with a strange echo. "What rises without breath and falls without dying?" it asked, though its tone was strained, as if forced to repeat the question endlessly. "Silence," McGonagall answered, and the door swung open. Inside, the common room was empty. Candles floated in midair, their flames bending toward a single point, the far wall, where a tall arched window opened onto the storm. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating a shape carved into the stone, a single bronze key embedded within a circle of runes. "The second," McGonagall murmured. Neville took a step closer, then froze. "Professor, look." The shadows at their feet began to ripple. From the corners of the room, faint figures emerged, transparent, silver blue, like the boy's echo from before. But these were many, dozens of them, students and teachers alike, faces both young and old. Draco swore under his breath. "The echoes have followed us." They pressed forward, drawn toward the bronze key. The light from their wands flickered as the air grew colder. McGonagall raised her wand. Expecto Patronum. Her spell burst forth, a brilliant silver cat leaping into the air. It prowled among the echoes, scattering them briefly, yet for every shadow driven back, another crept closer. Draco's own wand flashed, summoning a serpent-shaped Patronus that slithered across the floor, coiling protectively around the base of the window. Neville stood beside them, wand trembling. The figures whispered as they came, their voices overlapping, some pleading, some mocking, some filled with sorrow. Headmistress, why do you fight us? We only want to return. Let us breathe again. McGonagall ignored the whispers, focusing on the runes. They are bound to the key's magic, she said. If we can remove it, the link will break. She lifted her wand and traced the runes in the air. Revelio Aeternum. The carvings flared gold, then blue, then shattered like glass. The bronze key trembled and flew free, landing in her palm with a heavy pulse of energy. Instantly, the echoes froze. For a heartbeat, the entire room went still. Then, one by one, the spirits dissolved into light. Neville exhaled shakily. It worked. But Draco was staring out the window. No. Look. Across the sky above the lake, a column of light was rising, white at first, then streaked with red, piercing the clouds like a beacon. The storm quieted for a moment, and in that stillness came a distant sound, low and resonant, like 1,000 voices breathing as one. McGonagall's grip on the key tightened. The third is awakening. The Hufflepuff key? Neville asked. Yes, and if we delay, it will rise uncontrolled. She turned sharply. To the lower halls. There's a chamber beneath the greenhouses, older than the castle itself. That is where we'll find it. They descended through the castle's heart, the air thick with enchantment. As they passed the great hall, the candles flared of their own accord. Portraits turned their heads to watch, whispering in voices too soft to catch. Draco fell into step beside her. Headmistress, if all 3 keys awaken, what happens? The spell that guards the boundary between soul and shadow will break entirely, she said. The dead will not stay dead, nor will the living remain whole. Neville shuddered. Then we stop it, whatever it takes. At last they reached the courtyard. The rain had eased into mist, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Beyond the greenhouse doors, the air smelled of earth and wet leaves. Roots coiled thick as serpents through the soil. The 3 stood together in the doorway. McGonagall's wand burned faintly at its tip. Beneath the ground, she could already feel it. The slow pulse of buried magic, older than the forest, older than Hogwarts itself. The last key waits below, she said softly, and something else with it. Lightning flashed again, and far below their feet something stirred in answer, a deep tremor, followed by a whisper rising through the roots. The soil remembers every soul it has swallowed. McGonagall drew a steadying breath, her voice calm despite the cold weight of dread pressing against her chest. Then let it remember us as well, she said, for we go now to end what was begun 1,000 years ago. And with that, they descended into the earth beneath Hogwarts, where the 3rd key and the darkest of its secrets awaited them. The path beneath the greenhouses descended through damp earth and tangled roots. It was no ordinary passageway. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, the soil parting just enough for them to walk through, closing silently behind. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became, thick with the scent of loam and something older, faintly metallic, like iron buried for centuries. McGonagall led the way, her wand glowing faintly gold. The light caught the gleam of the underground streams trickling along the walls. The sound was soft, almost soothing, yet beneath it ran another rhythm. The deep, slow pulse of something alive beneath the soil. Neville kept his wand raised, whispering, "This isn't natural. Plants shouldn't grow this far down, not without sunlight." Draco gave a humorless laugh. "Nothing in Hogwarts grows naturally, Longbottom. Haven't you learned that by now?" "Quiet," McGonagall said softly. "Listen." They halted. Faintly, carried through the twisting corridors of earth, came the sound of voices, low and indistinct, as though from many mouths speaking as one. "Do you hear it?" Neville breathed. McGonagall nodded once. "The guardians of Hufflepuff's key. They speak in the voice of the ground itself." The passage opened suddenly into a vast hollow, its ceiling arched high above them, studded with pale roots that glimmered like strands of silver hair. Pools of water reflected their light, and in the center of the chamber grew a single enormous tree. Its trunk was blackened with age, its roots sprawling into the rock like veins of shadow. At its base, half buried in soil, gleamed a third key. Wrought of gold and amber, warm and pulsing like a living heart. "The Hufflepuff key," McGonagall murmured. Neville stepped forward, awe in his voice. "It's beautiful." "Don't be deceived," Draco warned. "Beauty is only one face of magic." The ground trembled as they approached. From the roots rose shapes, spectral figures, made of dust and light, faces calm and grave. Unlike the echoes they had seen before, these spirits did not whisper or weep. They stood in solemn silence, watching. One figure, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Its form was faint, but McGonagall recognized the broad shoulders and kind eyes from the old portraits that hung in the great hall. "Helga Hufflepuff," she whispered. The spirit inclined its head. Its voice, when it spoke, was deep and gentle, a sound like wind moving through leaves. "Minerva McGonagall," it said, "you come to disturb what was meant never to wake." McGonagall bowed her head respectfully. "I come to mend what has been broken, Founder." The keys of souls were turned, and now Hogwarts itself is unraveling. Students' spirits are being drawn from their bodies. I must restore the balance. Hufflepuff's eyes glowed softly. "And would you bear the burden of 3 keys, mortal? They were forged to bind souls, not to serve them. No one holds them long and remains whole." "I will bear what I must," McGonagall said. Her voice did not waver. A long silence followed. Then the spirit lifted her hand. The roots surrounding the golden key loosened, withdrawing into the soil. "Then take it," Hufflepuff said quietly. "But know that when the 3 are joined, their keeper's soul will not remain untouched." McGonagall stepped forward. The air shimmered with a low hum, and the roots seemed to sigh as she reached out and grasped the golden key. Its warmth spread through her fingers, gentle at first, then searing. She gritted her teeth and held fast. The chamber blazed with golden light, and for a moment the earth itself seemed to cry out. When the glow faded, the spirit was gone. Only the echo of her voice lingered. "Remember, Minerva McGonagall, to seal the keys is to seal a part of yourself." Neville hurried to her side. "Professor, are you all right?" McGonagall straightened slowly, her hand trembling slightly, but her face composed. I am. For now. Draco looked around the chamber warily. If we have all three, what comes next? The reunion of the keys, she said. They must be bound in the Hall of Echoes, the oldest chamber beneath the castle. It lies below the foundations of the Great Hall. The founders forged it as the heart of Hogwarts magic. As they made their way back through the passage, the walls around them began to shift and groan. The earth trembled, stones cracked. From somewhere deep below came a low, rumbling roar that was not thunder.
Neville gripped his wand tighter. It's waking, isn't it? Yes, McGonagall said grimly. The enchantment senses its power returning. It will fight us before the end. By the time they reached the main corridors, the castle had changed. The torches burned blue instead of gold. The air was thick and heavy. Shadows along the walls twitched, moving of their own accord. Every portrait they passed had fallen silent, the painted faces turning to watch them with wide, fearful eyes. Draco muttered, "It feels alive." "It is alive," McGonagall said softly, "and it remembers everything we have ever done." They descended the central stairway. The steps shifted beneath their feet, reshaping themselves, leading downward far beyond their usual depth. After a long descent, the air grew cooler, the stone older and smoother. The walls were lined with faintly glowing runes, and ahead stretched a vast door of black marble carved with 4 crests, lion, eagle, badger, and serpent, entwined by vines of silver. "The Hall of Echoes," McGonagall said. "Stand back." She drew the 3 keys from her cloak, silver, bronze, and gold. They pulsed in rhythm with one another, light threading between them like veins of fire. Holding them aloft, she spoke an incantation older than English itself. "Claves animarum, radiunt ad cor." The keys rose into the air. The door shuddered, then slowly began to open, revealing a chamber vast as a cathedral. Columns of translucent stone lined the hall, and between them drifted faint motes of light. Souls, countless and silent, suspended in the still air. At the far end stood a great pedestal, shaped like a heart, its surface etched with endless circles and sigils. "This is where it began," McGonagall whispered. They stepped inside. As the door closed behind them, the silence deepened, heavy and perfect. The floor beneath their feet glowed faintly, tracing the path of their steps. Neville turned slowly, awe in his voice. "It feels like every spell ever cast here lingers in the air." Draco's gaze swept the hall. "And every mistake." McGonagall approached the pedestal and placed the 3 keys upon it. Instantly the runes ignited, spreading outward in rings of light. The motes floating in the air flared brighter, forming vague shapes. Faces, hands, voices whispering just beyond hearing. But among them, a darker shadow began to stir. It rose from the far corner of the hall, vast and shifting, its form indistinct. A hollow shape filled with light and darkness both. Neville took a step back. "What is that?" "The shadow of the keys," McGonagall said. "The part of the enchantment that devours what it protects. It was born of the Founder's fear, and it will not surrender its hold willingly." The figure turned its faceless head toward them. Its voice echoed like thunder through stone. 3 keys, 3 souls, and 1 heart to bind them. You would mend what was meant to endure unbroken? Then come, Keeper, and be unmade. McGonagall's expression hardened. She lifted her wand high, light blazing from its tip. "So be it." The hall erupted in a roar of wind and magic. The shadows surged forward, and the battle for the soul of Hogwarts began. The air cracked like lightning.
power rippled through the hall of echoes, shaking dust from the vaulted ceiling. McGonagall stood at the heart of it, wand blazing, robes billowing in the torrent of magic. The shadow of the keys towered before her, vast, half-shaped, its form flickering between human and monstrous, made of smoke, memory, and light. Within it shimmered faces, hundreds, perhaps thousands, each one crying out, silent yet desperate, trapped in the folds of the darkness. Neville and Draco stood to either side of her, their wands drawn, their expressions set in grim determination. The voice came again, deeper now, like the rumble of mountains shifting. You would return the balance, Keeper? You know not the cost. To close the keys is to close the hearts of men. McGonagall's reply was steady, though the ground trembled beneath her feet. Then I will bear that cost, if it keeps Hogwarts whole. The shadow moved, its arms, vast as storm clouds, unfurled toward them. Each motion brought a rush of wind that tore at their robes and set the soul lights spinning in wild orbits. McGonagall raised her wand. Protego Maxima, a great shield, burst into being, a dome of blue light enclosing them. The shadow struck, and the impact cracked the spell like a bell. McGonagall staggered but held her ground. Draco shouted above the roar, "It's not trying to kill us, it's trying to feed. It's drawing from the keys." He was right. The 3 keys on the pedestal had begun to glow fiercely, their light being siphoned into the shadow's body. The runes on the floor pulsed red. The hall groaned as if alive. Neville aimed his wand. Stupefy! The spell vanished into the dark mass like a pebble into a lake, leaving not even a ripple. The shadow laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that filled every corner of the hall. You strike at what is eternal. You strike at yourselves. Shapes began to peel from its body, echoes of people they had known. McGonagall gasped as one form stepped from the mist. Albus Dumbledore, his half-moon spectacles gleaming faintly. His voice was soft, sorrowful. "Minerva," he said, "you cannot fight what is part of you. Let the keys close. Let the souls return to silence." McGonagall's heart twisted. For a moment she saw not the echo, but the man she had served beside for decades, whose wisdom had guided her through war and loss. But then she saw the eyes, not blue, but hollow white, shining with reflected malice. "You are not him," she whispered. "You are the fear of losing him." She slashed her wand through the air. "Ridiculous!" The shadow that wore Dumbledore's face recoiled, splitting apart like smoke in sunlight. Draco turned, eyes wide. "That worked? Only for what's made of memory," she said. "The rest, we must seal." The shadow screamed, the sound sharp enough to crack the floor. It drew in the floating souls, devouring their light. Every stolen soul made it stronger, more solid. Its shape shifted, first a serpent, then a figure cloaked in darkness, then a swirling storm of faces. Neville clenched his jaw. "There's too many." McGonagall's gaze went to the pedestal. The keys still pulsed, their light dimming. An idea struck her. Reckless, dangerous, but the only path left. "Draco, Neville, draw the circle around the pedestal. Use the Founder runes. Now!" Without hesitation, they obeyed. Neville traced Hufflepuff's symbol, a golden ring bound with roots, while Draco carved the serpent sigil of Slytherin with quick, precise strokes of his wand. McGonagall knelt and pressed her palm to the final rune, Ravenclaw's feather, glowing blue-white. Together the sigils formed a single pattern, a circle of unity, the very foundation of the castle's magic. The floor beneath them began to hum with deep, steady power. The The shadow halted, as though uncertain. Its voice dropped to a whisper that slithered through the air. You bind yourselves to doom. The keys will not obey without tribute. I know, McGonagall said softly. She stepped into the circle, raising her wand high. The air around her shimmered. Her eyes reflected the light of the 3 keys, now levitating above the pedestal. Their glow mingled into a single white flame. Neville's voice cracked. Professor, what are you doing? Finishing this, she said. Each key demands a piece of its keeper's soul to seal. That is the tribute, and I am the last keeper. Draco's eyes widened. No, you'll lose yourself. McGonagall's gaze softened, though her stance remained firm. A part of me, perhaps, but not all. Hogwarts and I have been bound since I first stepped through these doors. It is fitting that I should give back what it gave me. The shadow surged forward. The hall shook violently. Finite, Draco cried, sending a curse that burst harmlessly against its chest. Neville's vines of conjured roots reached out from the ground, slowing it only for a heartbeat. McGonagall closed her eyes and began to speak the final incantation. Her voice echoed through the hall, ancient and unwavering. Anima mea, anima vestra, in lumine concordiae, claudantur. Her wand flared like a star. The 3 keys spun faster, their light intertwining into a single column that pierced the ceiling of the hall. The shadow screamed, reeling back, its form unraveling into black mist. The stolen souls poured out of it, children, ghosts, fragments of lost laughter, rising like sparks toward the ceiling. The force of it threw Neville and Draco to the ground. The light became blinding. Professor, Neville shouted. McGonagall's form was half shrouded in white flame. She looked serene, ageless, her expression calm as the storm around her raged. The keys hovered before her heart, their glow pulsing with the rhythm of her breath. The shadow, weakened but not gone, lunged one final time. It struck the barrier of light and shattered. A sound like glass breaking filled the hall. Then silence. When the brilliance faded, McGonagall stood alone. The shadow was gone. The souls had vanished, their light absorbed into the walls and floor of the ancient hall. The pedestal was empty. The keys had melted into her wand, their essence fused forever. Neville crawled to his feet. Professor? She turned slowly toward him. Her face was pale, her eyes bright, but in their depths shimmered faint traces of silver and gold and blue, the colors of the keys. Her voice, when she spoke, carried an echo of the hall itself. It is done, she said. The balance is restored. Draco looked around, awe mingling with disbelief. What happens now? McGonagall glanced upward. The runes across the walls had dimmed, the power settling once more into sleep. Now, she said softly, Hogwarts dreams again. They climbed the long stairway back to the surface in silence. When they emerged into the great hall, dawn was breaking beyond the enchanted ceiling. The storm had passed. Light streamed through the tall windows, pure and golden. The castle was still, but alive, its ancient heart beating quietly beneath their feet. Neville turned to speak, but stopped when he saw McGonagall staring at the rising sun. A faint smile touched her lips. The keys of souls are at rest, she said. Let us hope they never wake again. Draco exhaled, half laughing, half sighing. You really are something else, Headmistress. She said nothing more. Her hand brushed the pocket where her wand rested, as warmer than it had ever been, humming faintly with the echo of the key's power. And somewhere deep beneath Hogwarts, The Hall of Echoes lay silent once more, its guardian now part of the castle itself. For as long as Hogwarts stood, so too would Minerva McGonagall's soul stand watch, unseen and eternal, the keeper of the keys of souls. In the days that followed the sealing of the keys, Hogwarts lay beneath a hush deeper than any since the war. The air itself felt watchful, as though the castle listened to every whisper and footstep. The storm clouds had passed, but their memory lingered in the smell of rain and stone. Classes resumed, but softly. No laughter in the halls, no songs from the ghosts. McGonagall moved through the corridors like a shadow herself. Her step was steady, her voice calm, but those who met her gaze saw a strange, new light in her eyes. Not weariness, but something vast and quiet, as though part of her stood elsewhere. In the evenings, she often walked alone to the North Tower, where the wind sighed through narrow windows. There she would stand with her hands clasped behind her back and listen. The castle, it seemed, now spoke to her in murmurs, faint threads of sound at the edge of hearing. Sometimes it was the whisper of the lake beneath the stones, sometimes the echo of students' laughter long past, and sometimes it was nothing but silence, deep and content. Neville noticed it first, the small, inexplicable changes. The mirrors no longer rippled when one passed, the torches burned steady, the ghosts seemed lighter, less tethered. Even Peeves returned to his usual mischief, hummed odd little songs about silver keys and sleeping doors before vanishing through walls. One afternoon, Neville climbed the moving staircases to McGonagall's office, a scroll tucked beneath his arm. He knocked, then entered at her call. She was seated behind her desk, quill poised above parchment, though her gaze rested on the fire. "You wish to see me, Professor?" She smiled faintly. "Always so proper, Longbottom. Come in. How fare the students?" "Better," he said. "The fear's fading. Whatever happened down there, it worked. Hogwarts feels right again." She inclined her head, but her expression was thoughtful. "Magic leaves scars even when it heals. Remember that." He hesitated. "You haven't been the same since that night." McGonagall's eyes met his, bright, steady, but touched with something unearthly. "The keys were bound to me. I can feel them still, deep in the stone. They will not trouble us again. Yet I am part of them now, as they are part of me." Neville frowned. "Does it hurt?" "No," she said softly. "It reminds me that the price of protection is seldom small." He laid the scroll on her desk. "I thought you should see this. It's from the library archives. There's a record of the keys being sealed once before, around the time of the founders' deaths. It says that each head of the school was chosen because their soul resonated with the castle's core. Maybe that's why you were able to do it." McGonagall regarded him with quiet surprise. "Then perhaps fate had its hand, or the castle chose me long before I ever taught here." A faint knock interrupted them. The door opened and Draco Malfoy stepped in, pale as ever but calmer than he had been in years. "Headmistress," he said, "I've come to say my farewells. I've accepted a position at the Ministry, Department of Magical Artifacts." McGonagall rose. "You'll be missed, Mr. Malfoy. Your knowledge of ancient magic has proven invaluable." Draco managed a thin smile. "Strange, isn't it? I once thought this castle cursed. Now I think it's the only place that ever truly knew me." "Perhaps both are true," she said. He hesitated, then reached into his cloak. "Before I go, I wanted to return this." In his hand lay a shard of glass, faintly luminous.
a fragment of the mirror that had shown her reflection that night. It shimmered faintly in the light. "I kept it after the battle," Draco said, "but it hums now, like it's alive." McGonagall took it carefully. The glass was warm to the touch as though it remembered her. She closed her fingers around it, and for an instant she felt a flicker of connection. The castle's pulse, slow and eternal. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This will rest where it belongs." That evening, after both men had gone, she climbed down to the great hall. The sky above was enchanted with the pale light of evening stars. Tables were empty, the last of the supper dishes cleared away. Her footsteps echoed softly as she crossed the vast room to the far wall, the one beneath which the Hall of Echoes slept. She placed the shard of mirror upon the stone floor. It glimmered faintly, then sank into the surface without a sound. The wall's runes shivered once and were still. "All is quiet," she whispered, but as she turned to leave, she heard a soft voice. "Not from any ghost, nor any portrait. Thank you." McGonagall froze. The voice was young, the boy Alden. She turned slowly. In the shimmer of the ceiling's light, she saw a faint outline, a small figure, smiling, whole again. He bowed his head and vanished like mist in sunlight. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She smiled faintly. "Sleep well, child." In the weeks that followed, spring crept back over the highlands. The lake thawed, the trees burst with green, and laughter returned to the courtyards. The castle, ever watchful, seemed content. Yet McGonagall could still feel the deep hum of the keys in the stone, not menacing now, but like a slow heartbeat. Hogwarts breathed, alive and eternal, bound to her as she to it. One night, near the end of term, she stood once more by her office window, watching the moon rise. A sound stirred the stillness, a low chord, as if from a great organ buried beneath the castle. It resonated through the walls, through her bones. "You hear it too?" came a voice behind her. It was the portrait of Dumbledore, his painted eyes twinkling softly. "I do," she said. "The castle dreams." "And so do you, Minerva," he said kindly. "You've become part of its song. It will never forget you." She smiled faintly. "Then perhaps that is enough." Outside, a warm wind swept across the lake. The towers shimmered under the moonlight, their reflections rippling in the water. Below, in the Hall of Echoes, the faint outlines of the keys gleamed for a moment, then dimmed. Not gone, merely resting. The castle's heart was steady once more. And in its quiet strength, McGonagall found peace. A peace born not of silence, but of understanding that every soul, every echo, every fragment of light and shadow within Hogwarts would endure, watched over by those who had given part of themselves to keep its magic whole. As dawn crept across the mountains, her eyes closed briefly, and she whispered to the rising sun, "For as long as Hogwarts stands, so shall I." And the castle, ancient and alive, seemed to answer, not with words, but with a soft pulse of warmth through every stone and tower, a promise whispered across time. "And we shall stand with you." The summer came early to the highlands that year. The grass on the slopes below the castle grew lush and high, and the lake glittered beneath skies of unbroken blue. Students basked on the lawns, laughter echoing faintly across the water, though the castle itself still seemed to listen more than it spoke. McGonagall rose early each morning, walking the battlements before breakfast. The air there was sharp and clean, carrying the cry of distant owls and the faint rush of wind through the forest. She walked not for exercise, but to listen,
to the murmur of ancient enchantments, to the heartbeat of stone beneath her feet. Since the night of the sealing she had slept little. The castle called to her in dreams, not with words but with memories not her own. The forging of the 4 wands that created Hogwarts' first wards, the laughter of the founders as they stood upon the cliffside, the night they sealed the keys of souls, for the first time fearing that death itself might walk their halls unchecked. In those dreams she sometimes saw Helga Hufflepuff again, her spirit calm and bright, whispering of balance and the duty of guardians. Other nights she saw nothing but the flicker of torches in the endless dark and the echo of her own footsteps following behind her. By day, she threw herself into her work. New professors were appointed. The greenhouses were rebuilt. The ghosts resumed their wandering. Neville took greater charge of his students, teaching them not only herbology, but the importance of listening to the land. Draco Malfoy's letters arrived from London, precise and brief, speaking of his studies into ancient wards and a new understanding of the nature of magical echoes. And yet, though peace had returned, a faint unease lingered beneath the calm. It began with the portraits. One evening, as McGonagall passed through the west corridor, she found the frames of several paintings empty. Their subjects had vanished, leaving only faint outlines upon the canvas. The fat lady, when questioned, said that the missing figures had simply gone walking. "Where to?" McGonagall asked. The fat lady had shivered. "Downward, headmistress, always downward." McGonagall's thoughts went immediately to the Hall of Echoes. That night she descended the long stairway beneath the great hall alone. The air grew colder as she went, the walls damp and slick with age. The runes upon the marble door were faint now, their glow little more than a memory. Yet as she approached, she felt it. A pulse, slow and deep, like the beat of a distant drum. The door opened at her touch. Inside the hall was dark. The key's sigils, long since fused with her own magic, shimmered faintly beneath the stone, casting ghostly light. The souls that had once drifted there were gone, but something else remained. A single shape hovered near the far wall. Not a soul nor a shadow, but a flickering projection, like a candle half burned. As she drew closer, it took form. A woman's figure, indistinct yet familiar. "Rowena Ravenclaw," McGonagall whispered. The apparition inclined its head. "So the keys rest again," the voice murmured, distant and musical. "You have done what few would dare." "I did what was needed," McGonagall said. "The balance holds." "For now," said Ravenclaw's echo, "but balance is not stillness. The keys bind the flow of life and death. Should one key falter, even by the will of mercy, the breach may open anew." McGonagall frowned. "I do not intend to falter." Ravenclaw's eyes, bright as cold fire, lingered upon her. "No intention remains untested. You are bound to the magic now. It will answer your heart, not your words." The light dimmed. When McGonagall blinked, the apparition was gone, leaving only silence. She stood a long moment before the pedestal, hands clasped tightly before her. The words troubled her. "The keys will answer your heart." As she turned to leave, a faint sound rose from the far end of the chamber, the creak of stone shifting. For a heartbeat she thought the walls had moved. Then she saw it, a narrow crack running along the edge of the floor, faint light glimmering beneath it. Her hand brushed her wand, but the tremor ceased. The crack sealed itself with a low sigh. When she emerged into the torchlight above, dawn was breaking. She felt the warmth of the rising sun on her face, but her heart was restless. The following day brought news from the hospital wing. Madame Pomfrey sent for her before breakfast. "It's the mirrors, headmistress," the nurse said, frowning. "Several of the older ones have gone strange again. Not dangerous, but strange. They show things that aren't there." McGonagall followed her through the ward. In one corner stood a tall mirror rimmed with silver. When she looked into it, her reflection was clear and ordinary, except for one thing. Behind her, faint but unmistakable, stood the shape of a great door carved with the 4 crests of Hogwarts. She turned sharply. The wall behind her was bare stone. When she looked back at the mirror, the image had vanished. That evening she wrote to Draco requesting his return. His reply came swiftly. "If the mirrors reflect what lies beneath, then the keys are stirring. I will come at once. Keep the students above ground." He arrived 2 days later, pale and tired, carrying a case filled with runic tools and ancient tomes. Together they examined the corridors, tracing the faint shimmer that now ran like veins of silver through the castle's walls. "It's residual magic," Draco said, crouching beside one such vein, "like blood in stone. The keys sealed the hall, but their energy continues to flow. It's adapting to you." "To me?" McGonagall asked. He nodded. "You're their keeper now. The castle mirrors your will and your fears. If something within you stirs, the magic may respond." She frowned. "I have no fears left to stir." Draco's gaze was level. "Everyone has one." That night she could not sleep. The whisper of the castle was louder now, threads of sound weaving through her dreams. In one she walked the corridors of Hogwarts as a young woman again, robes unwrinkled, eyes alight with ambition. Dumbledore was beside her, laughing softly, his voice echoing through empty halls. Then the laughter faded, replaced by the faint chime of keys striking one another. She turned and saw doors opening. She could see hundreds of them, each spilling light that was neither warm nor cold. From one door she heard a familiar voice, the boy Alden's, calling softly, "Headmistress." The doors open. She reached out and woke. Her hand was upon the edge of her desk. Beneath it lay her wand, faintly glowing. On the surface of the wood, 3 tiny symbols had appeared, a lion, a serpent, and a badger, pulsing softly with light. McGonagall stared at them, heart pounding. The castle was not merely awake, it was answering. Outside, a wind rose suddenly from the mountains, sweeping across the lake and rattling the windows. Somewhere deep below, the earth groaned, a sound she knew too well. The keys of souls were stirring once more, and this time it was not darkness that called to them, but something from within herself. The echo of magic that had chosen her as its keeper. The next morning dawned pale and trembling, sunlight glinting across the rain-wet stones of the courtyard. Yet despite the brightness, a strange tension hung in the air, subtle but undeniable. The portraits whispered behind their frames. Doors that had stood open for centuries now creaked shut of their own accord. Even the staircases, faithful though mischievous, hesitated before moving, as if wary of what stirred in the depths below. McGonagall stood at the top of the marble staircase, her hands clasped upon the rail, eyes turned toward the great hall. Students were beginning their breakfast, unaware of the faint quiver in the castle's foundations. Every sound, laughter, clinking cutlery, rustling parchment, seemed to echo longer than it should, stretching like the reflection of a candle in deep water. Draco arrived before the meal ended, his robes dark with travel. He did not wait for pleasantries. "It's spreading," he said quietly, his pale eyes sharp. "Whatever the keys awakened, it isn't confined to the Hall of Echoes anymore." McGonagall nodded grimly. "The castle is responding to me. I feel it. Last night I heard the sound of doors opening in my dreams. Not the doors of stone, the doors between thoughts." He followed her gaze toward the enchanted ceiling where clouds drifted lazily over a perfect summer sky. "Dreams?" he said. "Are you certain they were only dreams?" Her eyes flicked toward him, steady and cold. "Certain enough to be troubled." After breakfast, they descended to the dungeons once more, where the air was damp and the torches sputtered with blue fire. The cracks along the lower walls glimmered faintly, as though light were trapped within the very rock. They passed through the corridor of statues, each one watching with expressionless stone eyes. Neville joined them near the stairwell. "I felt it too," he said quietly. "The plants in Greenhouse 3 have started to react. Their roots keep turning toward the castle, as though drawn by something beneath." Draco grimaced. "Everything in this place has begun to breathe in rhythm with it." They came at last to the sealed door of the hall. The runes carved across its surface pulsed once, faintly, a heartbeat. McGonagall lifted her hand, and the light strengthened, answering her touch. "It recognizes you," Draco murmured. "That's both a blessing and a curse." "The castle sees me as its keeper," she replied. "If it is calling, I must answer." Neville shook his head. "You can't go alone. If it's truly awake, no one knows what lies beneath." McGonagall's lips thinned, but she nodded. Then together, as before. The door opened without a word. The Hall of Echoes was no longer silent. Where once the air had shimmered with soft light, now shadows drifted like smoke. The great pedestal still stood at its heart, but it gleamed brighter than before, veins of gold running through the stone, alive and pulsing. As they entered, the whispers began. "Keeper." The word brushed against their ears, soft as breath. "Keeper, come deeper." Neville gripped his wand tighter. "It's speaking to you." McGonagall's voice was low. "No, to itself. The castle's soul is awakening." Draco drew nearer the pedestal. "The key's energy is changed. It's not hostile. It's searching." He frowned, tracing the glowing lines with a gloved hand. "They're trying to merge." "Merging?" Neville asked. Draco nodded. When the keys were first forged, each founder bound a part of their essence to the enchantment. Slytherins guarded the shadows, Hufflepuffs the living, Ravenclaws the wisdom between. But there was always a fourth, the one to unite them. Gryffindor's, McGonagall's breath caught, but his key was never made. "Exactly," Draco said. "The founders sealed the enchantment incomplete. It relied on harmony, not mastery. But now, the keys have found a keeper who embodies all four." Neville looked at her. "You mean you?" Before she could answer, the ground beneath them trembled. The golden light surged from the pedestal, swirling into the air, forming a pattern. 4 intersecting circles, each glowing with the colors of a house. At the center burned white flame. McGonagall's wand rose of its own accord, drawn by invisible force. The light touched her chest, not painfully, but with weight, as though the entire castle pressed against her heart. Draco's voice echoed distantly. "Headmistress, let it flow through you, not into you." But it was too late. The light had already spread. threads of energy weaving through her limbs, her mind, her very breath. Visions flared behind her eyes. She saw the founders as they had once stood. 4 figures united beneath the starlit roof of an unfinished castle. She heard their voices, Helga's calm warmth, Rowena's measured wisdom, Salazar's warning hiss, Godric's ringing laughter. Then the laughter faded into silence, and the vision darkened. She saw the same hall as it now was, cracked, broken, filled with shifting shadows. In its depths, something stirred, a shape vast and indistinct, like a storm behind glass. When the light faded, she was on her knees, her wand lying beside her. Draco and Neville stood over her, faces pale. "What did you see?" Neville asked. McGonagall steadied herself, rising slowly. The truth of the keys. They were not merely protection. They were prison and promise both. Draco frowned. "Prison?" She nodded. The founders did not only bind the wandering souls. They bound something greater. Something that was once part of Hogwarts itself. The spirit that gave the castle life. When they sealed the keys, they sealed away its heart. Neville's eyes widened. "Then the magic we feel isn't evil. It's the castle trying to awaken." "Yes," she said softly, "and it is using me to do so." A deep rumble shook the floor. Cracks spread across the walls, glowing with inner fire. From the fissures spilled faint lights. Thousands of them drifting upward like sparks. The souls of Hogwarts, every echo, every trace of memory, drawn toward the center. The pedestal split open. Within it shimmered a 4th key. Not metal, not crystal, but pure white flame. "The Gryffindor key," McGonagall whispered. "It has been waiting." She reached toward it, but Draco caught her arm. "Don't. You can't contain 4. The magic will destroy you." She looked at him then, her gaze calm and fierce all at once. "If I turn away, the castle will die, and Hogwarts is not stone and timber. It is every soul that ever found refuge here. Every child who learned, every ghost who lingered. I cannot let that fade." She stepped forward. The white flame leapt to meet her hand. For an instant the world went still. Then light exploded outward, a sound like 1,000 bells ringing through stone. Neville fell back, shielding his eyes. Draco shouted something lost in the roar. When the brilliance faded, McGonagall stood at the center of the hall, her robes untouched, but her hair streaked with silver fire. Her eyes shone with quiet radiance. The pedestal was gone. The cracks were gone. The air was still. "Hogwarts lives," she whispered. The hall echoed her words, but this time not as a voice apart. It was her own voice, multiplied 100-fold, filling the space like a choir. Draco took an uncertain step closer. "Headmistress, what have you done?" McGonagall smiled faintly, though her face was pale as moonlight. "I have given the castle back its heart." Neville stared at her, speechless. Around them, faint motes of light drifted upward, dissolving into the air. The hall felt warmer, lighter, filled with something vast and living. But beneath it all, McGonagall felt the weight, the steady pulse of 4 keys. Within her soul, their harmony perfect, yet fragile. The castle was whole again, yet she knew that from this moment forward, her life and Hogwarts were bound utterly. One would not outlast the other. Still, as they climbed toward the surface, dawn light spilling through the upper corridors, she smiled. The walls thrummed gently beneath her hand, like the purr of a great creature content at last. Whatever came next, darkness or dawn, Hogwarts would never again stand alone. The dawn that followed was unlike any Hogwarts had seen in living memory. Light poured through the towers, soft and golden, as though the castle itself glowed from within. Every surface shimmered faintly. The tapestries, the windows, even the stone beneath one's feet seemed alive, breathing with a pulse of quiet magic. When the students awoke, they found the corridors bathed in warmth. Where there had once been cold drafts and whispering echoes, now there was calm, the kind of stillness that follows a storm long endured. The ghosts drifted through the halls, pale and radiant, their forms steady for the first time in centuries. Even Peeves floated by with an almost reverent hush, humming tunelessly under his breath, his usual chaos stilled by something older than mischief. McGonagall walked the length of the great hall, her steps echoing softly in the vastness. The enchanted ceiling reflected a perfect morning. Bright skies and drifting clouds, yet beneath her calm expression her heart carried the weight of what had passed. She felt the castle's energy within her, humming faintly like distant thunder. The power of the four keys fused to her spirit. At the teacher's table, Neville waited, papers and books piled beside his teacup. "You look different," he said quietly. McGonagall allowed herself a small smile. "Different, Mr. Longbottom?" He hesitated, then said, "Older, perhaps. Or maybe larger, as if the castle's light reaches through you." She said nothing, though she could feel it. Threads of magic connecting her to every stone, every window, every heartbeat within these walls. When she closed her eyes, she could sense them all. The rustle of quills in the library, the laughter of children in the courtyards, the flutter of owls high in the rafters. It was not power in the way wizards measured it, no wand work or incantation, but something deeper, quieter. She was no longer simply headmistress. She was part of Hogwarts itself. Draco arrived soon after, his cloak streaked with travel dust, his expression drawn but resolute. "The Ministry sent envoys this morning," he said, lowering his voice as he approached. "They've detected an energy surge spanning half of Scotland. They think some ancient ward has been renewed." "It has?" McGonagall said, "and it must remain undisturbed. Tell them that Hogwarts is secure, that the old magic merely stirs to breathe." He studied her for a moment, then inclined his head. "You've changed, too." McGonagall's eyes met his, sharp but weary. "The castle's magic is not something to master, Draco. It is something to serve." He looked away as though the truth of that unsettled him. "You'll need to be careful. The balance you restored, it may not remain stable forever." "I know," she said softly, "but for now, it holds." That night, as the castle slept, McGonagall sat alone in her office. The moon hung over the lake, its light streaming through the tall windows. The portraits of former headmasters watched her in silence. Even Dumbledore's frame, usually filled with gentle chatter, was still. She opened her journal and began to write. Her hand was steady, though her words came slowly. "The keys of souls are whole once more. The castle is quiet, but I feel it. The living rhythm of the wards, the breath of stone. It does not sleep, only dreams. The Founder's magic was never meant to be contained forever. It is not a wall, but a heart, beating through the centuries. I am its keeper now, but I fear I am also its mirror. Every thought, every memory the castle reflects." A sudden creak interrupted her writing. The fire in the grate flared higher, bright orange turning white. She stood quickly, wand in hand. But it was not danger that filled the room. The air shimmered, and from within, the light stepped a figure. It was no ghost, yet neither was it living. A silhouette woven of gold, face indistinct, though its voice was familiar. "Minerva," it said, her breath caught. "Godric Gryffindor." The figure inclined its head, a smile glinting faintly through the light. "You carry my key, and with it the heart of this place." McGonagall bowed her head. "The castle breathes again, but the price—" He raised a hand. "Every act of creation bears its cost. You have done what even we feared to attempt, given Hogwarts its own will once more. It will watch over those who come after you, as you watched over them." She looked up, her voice quiet. "How long will it last?" "For as long as your spirit endures within its walls," he said. "And beyond that, for as long as others remember your name." The light around him began to fade. "Do not fear what you have become. The keys do not chain you. They join you to what you love most. The castle will not take from you what it does not give in return." When the light vanished, the room was still again. Only the faint warmth of the air remained, like a heartbeat slowing after exertion. McGonagall sat once more at her desk, her gaze falling upon the open journal. Her quill moved without conscious thought. The keys no longer guard the boundary between life and death. They guard the memory of all who ever belonged here. I feel them. Every soul, every echo. They are not trapped. They are held, cherished, remembered. This is what Hogwarts was meant to be. A sanctuary not only for the living, but for the light of all who passed through its gates. Her hand stilled, she looked up, listening. The castle seemed to hum softly in answer, as if in approval. The weeks passed. The end of term drew near, and the Hogwarts Express prepared once more for its journey south. McGonagall stood upon the platform as the students boarded, watching their laughter fill the air. Her heart swelled with quiet pride. When the train had gone, she remained alone upon the platform. The sun was setting over the lake, painting the sky in amber and rose. A soft breeze stirred the reeds, carrying the scent of rain and old magic. She closed her eyes. In the stillness, she felt it again. The pulse of the castle beneath her feet, the harmony of 4 keys beating as one. Somewhere deep within that vast symphony, she heard her own heart echo in time. And far below in the Hall of Echoes, faint light stirred once more. Not the fevered glow of unrest, but the steady gleam of peace. The runes upon the floor shone like stars in deep water, and from the shadows came a whisper, soft and certain. "Keeper of souls. All is well." McGonagall smiled, her eyes bright in the fading light. "Then let it remain so," she murmured, "for Hogwarts stands, and so shall I." The wind carried her words away, mingling them with the quiet song of the lake and the whisper of the castle's eternal breath. And as night descended, the lights of Hogwarts burned brighter than ever, a beacon of magic, memory, and home, its heart bound forever to the woman who had restored its soul. Autumn crept once more across the highlands, cloaking the hills in gold and crimson. The lake mirrored skies of pewter and bronze, and a hush of wind carried the scent of fallen leaves through the castle's open windows. It was a quieter Hogwarts than the one that had stood before the war, not sorrowful but tempered, matured by all it had endured. And through its corridors, the spirit of its keeper moved unseen, her presence now woven into every flicker of torchlight and sigh of stone. Minerva McGonagall still walked those halls in the flesh, her step measured, her gaze steady, but she no longer felt entirely human. The connection forged in the Hall of Echoes had changed her. She heard the whisper of portraits before they spoke, sensed the approach of a student before their footsteps fell. The castle's moods ran through her like a second heartbeat. When it was restless, so was she. When it was calm, her own spirit eased. The other professors saw it, though none dared to speak of it aloud. To the students, she was the same formidable headmistress. Sharp of wit, fair of judgment, and utterly incorruptible. Yet even they felt the difference. When McGonagall entered a room, candles brightened. When she smiled, rare but genuine, the air grew warmer, and when she frowned, the shadows drew long. One night, as the harvest moon rose above the forbidden forest, she stood upon the astronomy tower, the wind lifting the edge of her cloak. Far below, the lights of Hogsmeade shimmered faintly, and the cries of owls drifted through the night. She was not alone. Neville Longbottom climbed the final steps to join her, breath misting in the chill air. He had grown broader with the years, his once timid voice now strong, but his eyes were still those of the earnest boy she had once taught. "I knew I'd find you here," he said softly. McGonagall turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "Hogwarts is never truly silent, Neville. One must listen to it breathe." He stepped beside her, leaning on the cold stone rail. "You haven't left the grounds in months. The castle requires me." He looked at her then, not as a student to a teacher, but as a friend to a friend. "And what do you require?" She said nothing for a long moment. The moonlight silvered her hair, her face still and pale as carved marble. "It is enough to know that the magic holds," she said at last, "that peace endures. But the cost—" "There was always a cost," she interrupted gently. "To teach, to fight, to protect. The price has always been the same. We give of ourselves piece by piece until we are part of the world we defend." Neville's gaze dropped to the lake below, where the moon lay reflected like a coin on dark water. "Then perhaps the castle keeps your reflection now," he murmured, "and one day it won't give it back." She smiled faintly. "Then I should count myself fortunate to rest where I've spent my life." They stood together in silence, listening to the distant song of the wind in the forest. After a time, McGonagall turned to leave. "Good night, Professor Longbottom." "Good night, Headmistress," he said, though as she descended the stairs, he thought he saw the faintest shimmer in the air around her, as if the light itself bent to her presence. Weeks passed, the days shortened, and frost laced the windows. In early November, as the first snow fell, strange dreams began to ripple through the castle. Students woke in the night speaking of soft voices, of doors that glowed faintly in their sleep. One girl claimed she had seen McGonagall walking the corridors long after curfew, though the headmistress had been in her office the entire time. Whispers spread. Some said the castle had begun to move on its own again. Others said it was only the old magic, restless beneath the snow. McGonagall felt it too. The hum in the stones that had once been steady now throbbed with uneven rhythm like a pulse under strain. The walls seemed to breathe faster, the portraits more alert. At times she would pause mid-lesson, her gaze distant, listening to something none of the students could hear. Then, one night, the whisper became a voice. She awoke in darkness. The fire in her hearth burned low. A chill wind stirred the curtains. "Keeper," the voice murmured, the same word that had haunted her since the beginning. She rose slowly. "Who calls me?" The answer came from everywhere at once, echoing through the walls and floor. "The keys remember. The heart beats too strongly. The balance wavers. She gripped her wand. You speak in riddles. The castle grows. Its soul stretches beyond the bounds we set. The living and the lost walk side by side again. The air shimmered, and suddenly she saw them. Faint silhouettes standing in the corners of her office. Ghostly, not quite real. The founders, Helga's calm face, Rowena's cool, sharp gaze, Salazar's hooded eyes, Godric's proud bearing. McGonagall bowed her head, but her voice was firm. Why do you return? Helga's spirit spoke first, gentle as spring rain. To warn you, child of our legacy. You have given the castle what it long desired, freedom. But all hearts crave more than peace. Rowena's image inclined her head. It learns as you learned, Minerva. It begins to think, to dream. But dreams ungoverned may grow wild. Salazar's shadow smiled thinly. Magic without measure is hunger. You must teach it restraint. And how? She demanded. You forged this spell, not I. Godric's laughter, soft and sad, filled the room. You carry my key, and with it, my courage. You must do as we did, guide it, not chain it. Speak to the castle keeper. Remind it why it was born. Their forms wavered, fading like mist. Wait, she called. What if it does not listen? Rowena's voice lingered, a whisper of wind. Then you must listen instead. And they were gone. McGonagall stood alone. The fire flared once and then steadied. The next morning she summoned Neville and Draco. In the dim light of her office she told them what had passed. Both listened in grave silence. So the magic is awakening again? Draco said finally. No, McGonagall said. It is living. The castle is learning what it means to exist, to protect, to hope, to grieve. But it must learn what it means to rest. Neville frowned. And how do we teach a castle to rest? She turned to the window where snow fell in soft silence over the lake. By showing it that life goes on. That evening she gathered the school in the great hall. The students came in whispering groups, puzzled but curious. The teachers lined the dais, their faces lit by candlelight. McGonagall raised her wand. The ceiling above them shimmered, revealing not stars but memory. The vision of Hogwarts through the ages, its founding, its trials, its triumphs. This castle, she said, her voice carrying through the vast room, is more than stone. It remembers every footstep, every laughter, every loss. It is bound to us and we to it. Tonight, we do not bind it further. We let it breathe. She lowered her wand. The light dimmed to a gentle glow. A hush fell, not fear, but reverence. And as the students bowed their heads, McGonagall felt the castle's pulse slow, calm, settle once more into harmony. The walls sighed. The candles burned steady. Hogwarts dreamed, not restlessly this time, but peacefully, like a creature finally at ease. McGonagall closed her eyes, her heart steady, her spirit quiet. She had not conquered the castle's magic nor contained it. She had simply reminded it to be kind. And as snow fell beyond the high windows, the castle itself seemed to whisper in return, gentle and sure. We remember, Keeper, and we are home. Winter deepened its hold upon the highlands. The mountains stood cloaked in white, their peaks lost beneath drifting clouds, and the lake lay frozen under a crust of silver frost. Hogwarts rose above it all, ageless and still, its towers gleaming beneath the pale light of the cold sun. Smoke curled from its chimneys, mingling with the scent of pine and snow. The air hummed faintly, not with unrest, but with life. McGonagall felt it each morning as she crossed the courtyards. The rhythm of magic beneath her feet. The keys were silent now, Yet their power pulsed within her like a second heart. She no longer needed to listen to hear the castle breathe. She felt its every sigh as her own. The students, though they knew nothing of the depth of the enchantment that surrounded them, sensed her calm and drew courage from it. Under her watch, Hogwarts had entered a new age, one of quiet strength, of healing and remembrance. Yet even peace has its shadows. Late one evening, as snow fell in hushed cascades beyond her window, she sat before the fire in her office, reviewing parchment reports from the ministry. Her tea had gone cold beside her hand. The flames flickered low, and for a time she drifted half into thought. The castle was at rest, but deep within its foundations she felt a faint tremor, not of danger, but of yearning. It was the feeling of something vast turning in its sleep. Then came a soft knock. "Enter," she said. The door opened and Draco Malfoy stepped in. His cloak was dusted with snow, his expression thoughtful. He looked older now, not merely by years, but by the weight of understanding that time had given him. "You should be abed, Mr. Malfoy," she said without looking up. "Even the most diligent curse-breaker must rest." He smiled faintly. "I've never been good at sleeping when there are questions to be answered. That much I've gathered." He moved closer to the fire, his pale eyes reflecting the light. "I finished translating the fragments from the Founder's grimoire, the ones about the keys. There's something you should know." She gestured for him to sit. "Speak." He drew a folded page from his cloak, worn and smudged with age. "It says that when the fourth key is awakened, the keeper will not merely guard the castle, but become its bridge, the point where the living and the remembered meet. It warns that, in time, her essence will pass fully into the stone." McGonagall's eyes met his, calm but steady. "I have long suspected as much." "You're accepting it?" he said, incredulous. "You'll lose yourself." "I will endure as long as I must," she said softly. "And when that time ends, Hogwarts will endure through me." Draco's hand tightened on the parchment. "There must be another way. Magic that deep can't be left unchecked. It changes everything it touches." She smiled faintly. "It has always changed everything it touched, Mr. Malfoy. It changed you. It changed me. That is its nature, though to shape, not to destroy." He said nothing, and after a moment she rose, her gaze turning to the night beyond the window. The snow had stopped. The world outside shimmered under moonlight. "The castle will outlive us all," she murmured. "Let it remember what love is, not only what loss feels like." When Draco left, she remained standing there, watching the snow until dawn. In the days that followed, strange warmth returned to the air, though the winter held. Students spoke of hearing faint music echoing through the corridors, not sung, but breathed, as though the castle itself hummed with gentle joy. The ghosts glided lighter than before, and the portraits seemed content to doze in their frames. McGonagall walked the halls quietly, observing it all with quiet satisfaction. Her heart ached with pride, and something else, softer, like a thread pulling her downward. Each day the pulse of the castle grew stronger within her. She could feel its awareness brushing against her mind, curious, affectionate, alive. One afternoon she stood by the frozen lake with Neville, who had come to speak of the next term's lessons. The air shimmered faintly, though the cold did not bite. "The castle feels different," Neville said. "It's almost as if it's watching us." McGonagall smiled. "It always has." He glanced at her. "You're leaving us soon, aren't you?" She was silent for a long moment, then said quietly, "Not leaving, becoming." Neville's eyes glistened, but he nodded slowly, understanding without words. That night, when the stars hung sharp and bright above the towers, McGonagall descended once more to the depths beneath the great hall. The torches lit themselves as she passed, golden light glinting off the ancient walls. The door to the Hall of Echoes opened soundlessly at her touch. Inside, all was as she remembered. The wide chamber of pale stone, the runes upon the floor, faintly aglow. At its center, where once the pedestal of the keys had stood, now rose a single archway carved from living light. Through it shimmered a vastness, a space beyond time filled with the soft murmur of countless voices, the voices of Hogwarts. She stepped forward, her breath steady. "It is time," she said, her voice clear and calm. The air trembled, and from the glow emerged faint shapes, the shadows of the founders, their faces proud and serene. "You have done well, Keeper," said Godric Gryffindor, his voice like the peal of bells. "The balance holds," said Rowena, her eyes gleaming like moonlit glass. "Few could have borne it," Helga murmured. "And yet she did," hissed Salazar, a hint of respect in his tone. McGonagall bowed her head. "Hogwarts is whole, but it must not be bound to one life. Let my passing be its freedom." The figures inclined their heads. "So shall it be," said Gryffindor. The light of the archway deepened, golden and blue, silver and green. She felt its warmth wrap around her, not like fire, but like home. Her last thought was of her first day at Hogwarts. The awe she had felt walking through the great doors, the wonder in every heartbeat, the same wonder she'd spent her life protecting. As the light enveloped her, she did not fall. She became. The castle trembled once, not in grief, but in awakening. Every torch flared, every bell rang, every stone sang a single note that echoed across the highlands like a whisper of eternity. When morning came, the office of the headmistress was still. On the desk lay her wand, beside it a folded note in neat, precise handwriting. "The keys are sealed. The keeper rests. Hogwarts stands." The portraits wept quietly, though none spoke. But as the sun rose, golden light filled the room, and for one breathless moment, every window in the castle glowed with the warmth of life. The walls seemed to exhale, soft and steady, as though relieved of long sorrow. The castle had found its guardian eternal, not above it, but within it. And though no one would ever see her again, every child who passed through Hogwarts would feel it, in the way the staircases creaked kindly beneath their feet, in the warmth of the fires, in the courage that filled their hearts when they were afraid. Minerva McGonagall lived on, not as memory nor ghost, but as the very spirit of the school, the last and truest keeper of souls. And beneath the whispering towers of Hogwarts, the keys slept at last in perfect peace.